Thank you for joining us. I'm Jose Cardenas. La Finiquera is an online publication that aims to fill a gap in arts and culture and fight misconceptions about Latinos. Joining me to talk about the online magazine are Eduardo Bernal, co-owner and co-publisher, and Nubia Enriquez, also co-owner and co-publisher of La Finiquera. Welcome to Horizonte, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
So, what's the gap that you are trying to fill?
Nubia, you want to take it?
Sure. So, for some time we've been noticing that there's a gap in coverage of Latino arts and culture from the perspective of millennials. So
From the mainstream media? Or?
Yeah, so that's kind of what we're trying to cover here. It's the things that we're doing, the things that we're creating, how we're shaping the identity of the city, and the stories that we have to tell that are not necessarily being told by mainstream media.
So, Eduardo, you were involved for many years with La Voz, the
Yes.
Arts and Culture Beat. So what do you do now that you didn't think was being covered before?
There were the misconceptions that you were talking about what Latinos do or what is trending with Latinos, and sometimes we would have someone say that Latinos don't go to Scottsdale to have breakfast, or don't go to the West Side to find elotes or raspados, which is not true. Latinos they move throughout the city and throughout the valley, and they consume all over it. So one of our purposes was to show how actually Finiqueros consume, where do they go, when do they go, and that was basically our one of our purposes.
And Nubia, we should talk about what the derivation of Finiquero is, Finiquera.
Mm-hmm. So it's a name that we started hearing around the city actually many years ago, and we started using it as a term of endearment for the city, and it's a cool term, and it's in Spanish, so we know that it was Latinos that came up with it. The interesting thing is that we're exploring the meaning of the word, who came up with it, when it came about, and so that's one of the interesting things about this as well, is that we're starting to hear feedback about speculations about where it comes from. So I think that's one of the stories that we'll eventually do. Not yet, because we don't know the full story yet, but one of the things that we'll explain is where this term came from more accurately.
One of the speculations is that there was a radio DJ in the 80s that started using the word Finiquera, and that's how it came about. It is basically a nickname for our city. Latinos are known to put nicknames on everything. So this is basically
even their relatives.
Even their relatives, yeah, especially the ones who love most. It's not. There's no motive to denigrate or do anything like that. But that is our nickname, and that it encompasses so many people and so many backgrounds. It's not just Latinos or people of Latino descent that are Finiqueros.
Now, one of the articles written about this venture, you're not exactly quoted, but the discussion has to do with a concern that the focus of the media so far has been more on the unacculturated immigrant, and you're looking more at the bicultural population and a millennial population.
Yeah, our publication is entirely in Spanish and English, so readers can select and choose either language to read. But also we have this need to represent what are the new demographics, or the real demographics of Phoenix, and we've seen that Finiqueros are not just people that came from Mexico or South America. Finiqueros are basically people from all over the world. It's just a way of identifying yourself. It's at some point somebody said that Chicano, you can identify being Chicano, either if you were from Bolivia or Argentina or whichever country. So Finiquero, you can identify yourself as a Finiquero no matter your nationality.
And Nubia, on the English and Spanish part of it, we're not talking about Spanglish as being part of the publication.
So we do use some Spanglish in the stories, but the focus is to, especially on the Spanish side, be very respectful to the language and make sure that we create a pride in using Spanish. We live in a place that unfortunately discriminates in a lot of ways, and language is one of them. So we wanted to make sure that millennials or whoever actually comes to read the publication, if they want to read the content in Spanish, they can. If they want to do it in English, they can also, because that's how we consume. We're on Facebook and we're reading Facebook feeds that are in English and in Spanish from different members of our families or from friends. So we code switch like that all the time. So we want people to be able to do that because we know that that's how we consume media. So a part of it is, like I said, the creation of pride in the language. A lot of what LaPhoenikera.com does is to try to create a pride in the city itself, and language is a big part of it.
And the focus really is Phoenix, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a hyper-local publication. And we're kind of hesitant to call it or to just say that we cover Latino arts and culture, because LaPhoenikera culture is much more diverse than that. So, for example...
In what way?
So there's people that have been part of the culture scene here for years, and they might not be Latino, but they're a big part of the city, and we would be kind of doing a damage by not covering these people that might not necessarily identify as Latino, but they've been part of the creation of the identity of the city. We always talk about degentrification, for example. He's Caucasian. He plays at the oldest bar in the city called Bikini Lounge. He plays there every Tuesday, 6 Tuesdays. So he's one of the quintessential DJs in the city, and we would not be able to talk about music, for example, which is one of the things we cover, without talking about this particular DJ, just because he's been here for so long and doing such amazing things.
So you're looking at the stuff that appeals to the audience you're focused on.
Exactly.
So Eduardo, I want to go back to something you said earlier about even people from South America could identify as Chicanos, so forth. Usually the discussions we have are with terms like Chicanos or La Raza, and people feeling that that's too limiting, and that's why they go to the broader terms, Latinos, Hispanics. I know there's debate about the term.
Yeah.
You're not seeing that in terms of what you guys are, the audience you're appealing to?
Well, what we're seeing is that people identify themselves however they want to. So there is no... we're in a generation where labels, kind of even the millennial label, is something that people try to move away from. So I see that people can identify within our friends. They identify as finiqueros, and I don't think it bothers people when they say, "Oh, I'm a Chicano," or "I'm a Chicana," or "I'm this," or "I'm that." Yeah, it might alienate, I suppose, some people. But
on the other hand,
we don't feel it like
it
that.
gives you another broad term that picks up everybody. Basically Latino background, but this finiquera mentality, it's a state of mind, perhaps?
Well, the thing is that when we conceived this, it has a Latino slant. Because we're Latinos, so we're gonna want to cover those stories. But again, Phoenix is very broad. Phoenix is very diverse, and it's made up of a lot of nationalities. So, for example, we've had some conversations of people that tell us it's really cool that you're covering the stories of people of color. So it's not necessarily that they're seeing just Latinos being represented in the publication, but it's, we want to cover anything from Native American to the Black community to other things. Again, the things that make up the identity of the city itself. It so happens that Latinos make up 40% of the population of La Finiquera, and we're Latinos, so there's naturally going to be that slant. But we definitely want to be intentional about covering a broader spectrum of people.
And specifically with the Phoenix culture, it's so plural and it has so many participants that it would be, like Nubia said, a disservice to Phoenix to just expose Latinos it would be.
It would not be accurate.
Not be accurate, at all.
So, Nubia, last question. We've been talking about arts and culture and filling that gap, but La Finiquera is more than that, and you talk politics, among other things.
Yeah, so we always say that we can't cover Phoenix culture without covering the politics of it. And so we cover different things from food, music, film, obviously arts and culture, and one of them is politics. But we always discuss that we want this to be from a very actionable perspective. So not necessarily what happened in yesterday's march, but what can people do to participate in the political process? If they can't vote, what can they do? If they can't go to a march, what can they do? So making sure that people feel active. We live in a place that obviously requires it. So we just want people to be informed and to participate in politics in our city and in our state.
And also what we were talking about earlier was the level of involvement. So we want information that is practical for people, and so that they can find what level of involvement they're gonna take in whichever action. So that is one of our purposes as well.
Well, it's all very exciting. Thank you so much for joining us on Horizonte to
Thank
talk
you.
about it,
Appreciate
and
it.
best of luck. Coming up.